All right, welcome to the 9th installment of the Kentucky Elk Hunter webinar series. So today we're going to change directions a little bit and talk about elk biology and how that relates to elk hunting. So as I mentioned in the last episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button to get notified when these videos go live. The next few videos are going to be very much hunter focused. So this will be elk biology. We'll have a rifle elk hunting video. We'll talk about packing elk out, calling elk hunting tactics. So we're kind of in the period of the year where we're going to get serious on this podcast about actually hunting elk. So we're recording this Monday, the 11th. The area and unit draw has been conducted and should be up on the web at some point this week. We'll be sure to email all the hunters and let them know when those results go live. But we're basically working to get that live as we speak. So today I'm joined by Joe and also Dan Crank. Dan's one of our elk biologists, works out of the hazard office. He's also a lifelong elk hunter. You'll certainly be seeing more of Dan in the future, like next week. So Dan, take just a minute and introduce yourself.
Okay, yeah, I'm Dan Crank. I'm one of the elk biologists with the department. I've been here since 2000, so I've been here quite a while, about 22 years. Before that, I worked with UK on their side of elk research for a few years. But been here in Hazard all those years, and been involved in a lot of almost everything with the elk program, except the first couple of years I've been around and been involved with.
Awesome. Yeah, Dan was around when the elk came to Kentucky. So he's seen it from the very beginning. So for this presentation, Dan's going to lead us through it. He's got a really nice PowerPoint made. You can certainly listen to this as a podcast, but there's going to be some good visuals all the way through this thing. He's going to share his screen and run us through a PowerPoint presentation. So Dan, unless Joe's got anything to kick us off, feel free to share and we'll roll on.
I'm all good. I'm just happy to be back and out of COVID purgatory.
All right, let's see if we can get this pulled up. Let's see. Let's try this one. Okay. So today we're going to talk about biology. We're going to cover quite a few different topics, life history of elk and behaviors and that sort of thing. So we'll just kind of jump right into it. I get my screen to work. Okay, so what is an elk? Scientific name of an elk is Cervus canadensis. They are one of the largest of the deer species in the world. Really the only, I guess, other two deer that are bigger than elk or comparable would be red deer that are in Europe and also in New Zealand area. Been moved around a little bit, and the North American moose. So they're really similar to the red deer. They're overseas. Antler characteristics are a little bit different, but they're very similar in body size and that sort of thing. They are an even-toed ungulate, which means they have two toes. That's why you see the two hooves that they have. So, and they're also a ruminant, which means they have a four-chambered stomach, which is allows them to specialize to eat grasses and forbs and break those down and provide nutrition from those food sources. So similar to a whitetail, just a lot larger, basically. So let's look at some physical characteristics. They are described as having thick bodies with slender legs and short tails. Their tail is actually so short you may not even notice it when you're looking at it. It's only maybe 4 to 6 inches long, and it's white, so it kind of blends into their rump patch. Their average shoulder height is about 5 feet. That's for an adult cow or a bull. They're relatively the same height. The weight does differ sometimes dramatically depending on time of year. The females, which are called cows, average about 400 pounds as an adult, and males, which are called bulls, average about 600. That weight changes throughout the year depending on diet and what they're into. This time of year, when forage is readily available, They'll gain a lot of weight this time of year. And prior to rut, some bulls could be upwards of 800-900 pounds. Now, when they go through rut, they basically don't really eat much. They're chasing cows and their mind is on other things other than eating. So they lose a lot of weight during the rut period and enter into the winter time. Sometimes they'll lose 200 pounds or more through the rut and enter into wintertime a little undernourished sometimes. So it's really important that we have good forage here in late fall, winter for those bulls to stay healthy. And late spring is probably the hardest part of their life, which will be the lowest weight they'll be. So those weights vary a lot with our bulls. Only males have antlers. Of course, those antlers are shed every year and grow back as they do on all of our deer species. The coloration changes a little bit throughout the year and depending on sex too. They're mostly a reddish tan to a light tan with that white rump patch I mentioned earlier. Typically this time of year, they are that sort of really dark reddish coloration. As the fall comes and they get their winter coat, that winter coat is a little lighter in color. It's more of a tan color, and even in late winter, it seems that bulls are even an even lighter shade of tan. So sometimes you can actually identify a bull from a long way off just by his color. So that's one thing to look at, and also in that late winter season, if you kind of pay attention to it and you see a herd of elk, you can tell the bulls from the cows by looking at that color. Sometimes you can. So it's one thing to kind of keep in mind as what you can look for to identify elk from a distance, as those bulls will be a lighter color. I will move on into reproduction of elk. Cows are bred in the fall, just like most of our deer species, and they give birth in mid-May to mid-June. So right now, basically, we're finishing up our calving season right now. Females typically are not reproductively active until their second year of life, which is not like whitetail. Whitetail can be bred at 6 months old. It's a little rough on them, but it is possible. But with elk, they typically do not breed until that second year of life. We do have some research that shows us that some of our elk are bred as a yearling. Depends on the year. We with all the elk we capture, we try to take blood from them, and I can send that off and get a pregnancy test done on those. And depending on the year, it's anywhere from 10-15% up to 40% of our yearlings that we sample are bred. So that's one thing that's interesting with the calf project we have going on, is we've been able to catch some of those yearlings that were pregnant and follow them through to see if they did give birth and if those calves survive. So that's another thing we're looking at. So
Dan, do you care if I interject for a second? I want to talk about some of the Kentucky specifics on this. Just maybe for curiosity's sake, but what is our peak conception in the fall? How does that tie into why we hunt them? Kind of what are our reproductive rates and pregnancy rates, so just people know.
Yeah, typically, we can actually look at, we can tell when those elk are bred by backdating through some of the fetal data that we collect. And for the most part, our peak of reproduction is about the last week of September. And if you look at how that falls with our season dates, that's peak of the rut. That's right when kind of the end of archery season, beginning of rifle season. So our hunters are able to hunt those elk right during the peak of the rut. So then we do have, we'll have one rut that end of September. You'll have another rut, won't be as strong, but another rut about 4 weeks later, when those initial cows that weren't bred will come back into heat, and they'll cycle again. So we'll have another kind of mini rut. So, but that's typically what we've seen, is that late September, early October is when that peak is seems to be happening. Did that get it, Joe? Did that cover it?
Yeah. It's I just think it's important to note, because if you read most of the literature out there, the Western states, they're showing that their peak ruts generally like that first week and a half, like that 10th to 15th range, and we're about 2 weeks behind that. So I just thought that was
Yeah.
interesting to point out how we're a little bit different.
Yeah, it is interesting that eastern elk are just a little bit different with some of the dates that things occur. So it's something neat that we've been able to observe. So cows have one calf a year. They rarely ever have twins. On those cases they do have twins, a lot of times those two don't survive, because raising one calf is pretty hard on a cow. So requires a lot of nutrition on her part to take in a lot of nutrients to produce enough milk to handle one calf. So the calves generally stay with their mother about a year. So that calf is born around mid-May, mid-June. They stay with that cow till about March or April. When that cow kind of wants to move off on her own to go find a place to have her calf for that year, so they'll kick that yearling off, and we'll get into this in a minute. But you'll see these yearlings kind of group up and form their own little social structure this time of year. So, and again, cows should have a calf every year. Generally, a healthy cow will be able to sustain a calf every year. And generally, Western literature, like Joe was talking about, things are a little different out there as far as nutrition and how those elk survive. But generally, what you read is once a cow reaches 7 years of age, she kind of starts dwindling off with her reproductive rate. But elk here are a little different. We have a lot of good nutrition throughout the year. We don't have any large predators to speak of. And we've had cows that were upwards of 15, 20 years old that are still producing calves every year. So that's another good thing about our eastern elk is they have a lot better nutrition and seem to be reproducing a little better maybe. All right, we'll move into social structure. Elk are very much a herd animal. They kind of love to be around other elk. The only time that they're solitary would be those cows this time of year when they're out having a calf. They want to be alone by themselves to do that. And as soon as that calf is big enough to be mobile and move around, they'll group right back up again. So there's different times of year, see different types of social groups. Like stated here, our bulls and cows do form different social groups. We can kind of go through a year of elk. So this time of year, cows are by themselves having calves. Those yearlings that were kicked off, they'll kind of form their own little social group and try to figure out where they are in the world and kind of wait for things to happen later in the fall. Bulls this time of year are grouped up. And these big bachelor herds you'll probably see this time of year. As we move closer to probably the end of July, beginning of August, those cows with calves will group back up again. They'll group back up with those yearling groups. You'll start seeing bulls move into these bigger herds. And as we move in the rut, it'll start busting up again. Those adult bulls are busting up the cow groups into smaller harem groups. And be defending those. Once rut is over, cows kind of stay together, bulls kind of move off, and they're more solitary that time of year. They want to kind of lay up and heal, try to get as much nutrition as they can to build their strength back up for the winter. And a lot of times late in the winter, you'll see them all group back up together again. So it's kind of almost a never-ending cycle of elk moving in and out of these social groups. So, and that's one thing hunters will see this time of year, or especially they come down, later in July, early part of August. You'll see, all of a sudden there's a big group of 8 or 10 adult bulls together. And then when you come back down in September, they're gone. They've busted up again. That's because they're out trying to find their own harem of cows. They don't want to compete and fight with each other if they don't have to. So they will bust up. You'll see this, it just kind of changes all the time, depending on what time of the year that you're down here, looking for elk. So But like I said too, there's summer bachelor groups of bulls. There's also these nursery herds. You'll see that in late July and August, where these cows with calves will group up. A lot of times you'll see, anywhere from 20 to 40 cows together. You may see the calves all intermixed with them, or those calves may be laying off, maybe with a couple of cows in a different area resting while all the other mothers are out feeding. So you'll kind of see that too this time of year. In fall breeding and its effect, it has a big effect on social groups. Like I said, these bulls will bust these cow groups up into anywhere from 5 to maybe 20 cows. And of course, they defend those herds as much as they can, to try to keep to be able to reproduce and that's what hunters are going to see in August, September, October. You're going to see these smaller groups of elk with maybe 1 or 2 bulls in that group. As you get into December, when the cow hunt's coming, you may see these groups a little larger and more bulls around, or these bulls may be completely off by themselves. So, and again, in winter herds is when they basically all come back together. So you'll see a bigger group of elk that time of year. All right, rutting behavior in particular. Despite what a lot of people hear and may think, adult cows are the social leaders of elk. The bulls will move the herd around, try to keep cows together, but there's always one adult cow in that group that kind of rules the roost, and she takes that herd where she wants them to go, whether to a feeding area or a bedding area, and the bulls are kind of just following along. And a lot of times you'll see this in early morning, at the crack of dawn, around September, October, you'll see that herd out. All of a sudden, one cow takes off. She'll start walking, and the rest of them just follow. And the bull will always be last. The big adult bull, he's always last to make sure he's got all his cows together, and he'll follow them into wherever they're going that day for their bedding area. And they will divide some herds up. These bulls will. They'll try to bust them up, and their 2 bulls will fight over a group of cows and intermix and mingle and move things around a little bit, but the cows are always basically in control. And one thing you'll see, and hunters will see this a lot, is what we call satellite bulls. Most of our adult herd bulls are 4.5 years of age or older. The big, strong adult bulls in there. And you'll see these younger satellite bulls, the 2.5 to 3.5-year-old bulls, a little smaller body size, smaller antler size because they're young. They'll be kind of on the outskirt of that herd, just kind of trying to figure out how all this works and how to try to sneak in and cut a cow off and maybe try to breed that cow if you can. So a lot of times especially if you're out calling or bugling, you may hear that big bull somewhere. You bugle, and you'll hear maybe a couple of different bulls bugle, and the one that comes to you is kind of a small bull. You're thinking, well, that's kind of funny. I thought that bull would be bigger. But probably what you're doing is pulling that younger bull off, and the bigger bull is kind of staying put, guarding his cow. So, and then, like I said, these younger satellite bulls are always kind of on the outskirts. They're never really in there tight because that big bull is going to fight them and probably beat them up pretty bad. Another thing you'll see, everybody hears about bugling. Elk are extremely vocal. They make a lot of different noises. Cows and bulls both will mew. It's kind of a low, soft call. Of course, the bulls will bugle. There's a bark call that people will hear a lot, especially if you get maybe too close to an elk. They may wind you, they may see you, but not know what you are, and they'll actually bark at you. And that's a sort of a warning call, both to you and to the other elk around them, that, hey, something's not right here. They see something they don't like, and they're just letting everybody know that something's there. Something's there, and it's more of an alert type noise. Again, as we talked a little earlier, our rut here is generally late September, and it can run through late October, but generally middle to late October, it's kind of, the rut is kind of going away. Most cows have been bred by that time, and all these vocalizations and activities kind of die down a little bit. So move on into habitat use. So, a couple important things here. You're looking at social structure, what and where they are, and then you want to look at habitat use to see kind of where they are, what kind of areas they're using, and kind of use biology to find out where these animals are. So elk are a grazing animal. They like grasslands. They do utilize grasses and forbs and shrubs and acorns and everything. They're kind of a generalist, but for the most part, they are a grazing animal. So the things that you want to look for and things that are important to elk. Of course, you look for grassland. They need a good food source. You need to look for water. Elk need a lot of water. They're a big animal. A lot of times, especially here, they're going to use a lot of forest edge, right where the forest ends and grasslands begin. It's a very important place for them. And also interior woodlands. Unlike elk out west, they do have woods out west, but not like we do with the eastern forest. Elk generally in September, October, even November, it's still a little warm here. And elk are a big animal. They don't take to heat very well. That's why this time of year, if you're lucky enough to see elk during the daylight hours, early morning, as soon as the sun comes up, they're going right back into the woods. They want to be in the shade. They want to get where it's cool, and they don't want to move around a lot during the day because once they get hot, it's hard for them to get rid of that heat. So they do use interior woodlands a lot. Now, the effect of topography and aspect is another thing to think of. This goes for the same thing out west. When it's hot, elk want to be on a north slope. North slopes tend to be cooler. They have more shade. Direct sunlight is more likely on a south slope. In aspect, as far as topography goes, the thing you realize around here is mountains aren't just straight up and down. They'll go up and have a little shelf, and they'll go up and have a little shelf. And a lot of times these shelves have seeps in them. There'll be a little bit of water coming out. There's a really good spots to locate elk is if you can find a shelf on a north slope that has a little water. It's an excellent place to go look for elk, and you're probably going to find some bedding areas there and find elk in those areas. Seasonal differences, of course, it doesn't get really super cold here, but if it does get pretty cold, those elk may shift to a south-facing slope to try to warm up a little bit. So that's one thing that can totally reverse it. They may stay out longer, out in the sun longer in the wintertime. One, they need more forage because it's cold. And two, they want that sun on them to stay warm. So seasonal differences can play a big role in where to look for elk as far as topography and aspect. Then the big thing is effective hunting pressure on habitat selection. If elk are not pressured at all, they'll be out in the open more. They'll be closer to the forest edge. But as soon as people start pressuring those elk, they're going to take off to the deep interior of the woods, as far back in as they can get, to not be disturbed. Elk do not like being around people. They do not like being disturbed. And they are solitary in that aspect because they don't take well to people. So if you're hunting a place, people that archery hunt have the cream of the crop, the best time of the year, because those elk haven't been bothered yet, and they're less likely to have these deep interior wood movements due to hunting pressure. But first rifle comes in, they're kind of bothered a little bit. By the time second rifle comes around, they kind of know the game is what's going on, and they're going to get deeper back into some cover and stay away from people. So, the other thing is hard mast effect, and Joe and some of the other guys here have done some work looking at the effect of elk harvest and success rates when we have high mast production or low mast production. And when we have high mast production, these elk tend to stay in the woods more. They don't come out as much. They can stay more deeper interior in the woods because they have that giant food source in there of acorns and beech nuts and hickory nuts and all that. that they can utilize and not have to come back out on the grassland. So that's another thing to think about is if we have a lot of hard mass or there's a lot of soft mass out, they will key in on that if they are feeling a little pressured. So that's another thing to look at and keep in mind. Okay, we'll move into some Elk Sign. So what are you looking for when you go out there in the woods? So we're going to cover a little bit about tracks. We'll talk about scat, rubs, beds and bedding areas, wallows, and that famous musky elk scent that you're going to smell if you get out into the elk woods. So let's look at some sign here. Of course, on the top left, you've got an elk track. It's generally about 4 inches long, probably 2 to 3 inches wide. The easiest way to think of it is make a fist and kind of turn it sideways. That's about how big an elk track is going to be. Now, of course, the bulls will have a little bit bigger. It'll be in the mud a little bit deeper just because they're a heavier animal. You know, the cows will be kind of that normal 4-inch length and width. Calves will be about the size of a white-tailed deer. And they're about 6 months old. That's about how big their foot is. So those are some things you're going to see there. On the top right, we've got some elk scat. That's kind of typically what you're going to see. It's generally round and black or dark brown. And it may or may not have a dimple or a point on the end of it. One good thing you can do is if you find some elk sign and you're curious, you know, how old it is, you can pick up those pellets. And if it's really, really fresh, it'll almost have like a green hue to it and it'll be slick. If it's a little drier like this, you can actually bust it in your finger, just squeeze it. And if it's fairly fresh, it'll still have a little moisture inside of it. If it's really, really dry, it could be, you know, a couple weeks old to a year old. So that's the other thing to look at is the moisture content of those droppings to see how fresh it is. The bottom left, you've got kind of a typical elk rub. Generally, you know, they seem to like, you know, pine trees. Out in the open, you'll see more activity on sumac trees, on locust trees, that kind of thing. But generally, the easiest way to tell it from a deer is, you know, the size of the tree doesn't matter as much, but the damage to the tree is going to be very substantial if an elk gets a hold of it. You know, they're going to tear it up. You know, generally a whitetail is about knee high to waist high, maybe chest high. They rub on it, and the elk gets a hold of it, and they'll just completely shred it. You know, from the ground to maybe six feet up. If they can bend the tree over, they'll tear the top of it out. They'll just completely destroy that tree. And a lot of times too, if it's a pine tree, you can actually find guard hairs in it. You know, those big long neck mane hairs that bulls typically have that's, you know, brownish to even black. You'll see that stuck in the sap. So that's another good thing to look for. And you can also, if it's on like a locust tree or something, you may even smell it. You may smell that musky scent that they have on them. The bottom right is kind of a typical elk wallow. We don't see that a lot here, but you will find it. And elk really like to swim too. So, you know, they like to be in the water. So you may find that is a good place too, is a water source, a pond or a small water hole. But typically what a wallow is for is adult bulls will get in that wallow, they'll urinate in it. They have a really strong scented urine this time of year or in the fall. A lot of musk is in that urine. They'll urinate in that water and they'll just roll around in the mud and get it caked all over them, and it makes them a big scent bomb, basically. And if you get anywhere close to either that bull or this wallow, you'll smell it. It's a really good indication of how fresh things are, is if you can actually still smell the elk there. And that includes in bedding areas. You find a bedding area on a ridge top, you can get down and stick your nose down to the ground and you can smell it if it's fresh. You'll smell that musky scent. Even for cows, you can smell it a little bit. So that's another thing to kind of tell you if it's very fresh bedding area or not. But you'll see all these things a lot of times in a really good bedding area. So I think that's about it. If you guys want to add anything, we can, or go back to look at anything we can.
I do have one question, and this one I know is going to sound strange, but I get it. I get it every year. You know, a lot of our hunters, you know, maybe from more urban areas, suburban areas, aren't that familiar with elk. But we have a lot of other animals that are out there on our mineland areas. What's a good way to tell the difference in the absence of, say, scat or, you know, other identifying factors to tell the difference between like a beef cow hoof print and an elk print?
Okay. Yeah. It's pretty simple, really. For the most part, domestic cattle have more of a round foot. It'll be, you know, basically the size of a softball for a large adult bovine cow. And then as you look at elk, it'll be more of a triangle shape. You know, instead of being like this, it'll be more like that. So that's the easiest way to look at it, is the overall general shape of it. Domestic cattle is more of a circle. Elk are more of that arrowhead shape, I guess you could say. And adult bovine cattle generally are pretty big too. You know, you get a 1,000 pound or 800 to 1,000 pound Hereford cow. She's got a pretty big foot. You know, so you're gonna be able to see it pretty easy.
Thank you. Actually, said I know it's a weird one, but I probably get that one 5 or 6 times a year at least. I get a lot of random pictures. Hey, how can I tell this is elk? You know.
Yeah, it's tricked me a few times over the years. So Dan, one thing I was going to say, you just like in differentiating this from deer hunting, you know, when somebody's sitting in the deer stand in the fall, you're kind of hunting like solitary animals, more or less. That buck's probably going to come past. Maybe he's chasing a doe, but I think more so with elk, you're hunting a group, and understanding those group dynamics is one of the most important parts of this I think you can take. For bull hunters and cow hunters, you know, understanding what they're doing at a certain time of year will, you know, kind of influence how you need to be hunting them. So just kind of recap a little bit, like a bull hunter going into archery season and the first 2 weeks of gun season, what that dynamic is, and kind of they're going to hear satellite bull or herd bull. You hit on that a little bit, but kind of talk about what's going on right there.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you know, like I said, generally you're going to find, you know, probably one big herd bull with, you know, anywhere from, like I said, 5 to 15 cows with him, you know, and he's desperate to keep those cows together. He doesn't want to lose any of them. He's trying to breed all those cows that he can. And then you've got satellite bulls and other adult bulls. They're trying to get in on his action, you know, and these bulls are generally pretty vocal. You know, they're going to be bugling and breaking trees and running back and forth, and you know, kind of making all kinds of noise. And the good thing about that is a lot of times he's not paying attention to really what's going on. You know, a hunter could sneak in there as long as you play the wind right and they can't smell you. A lot of times these big bulls kind of ignore you a little bit. If you get in there with a cow call, you know, you can call those satellite bulls pretty quick to you. That herd bull may not be as apt to leave. If he's got 8 cows right here beside of him, and you're one solitary cow over there 100 yards away, cow calling, he may bugle at you. He may try to come that way, but he probably won't. You're going to have to make a move to kind of meet him in between. But that's the one good thing about rut is hunters can be pretty daggone aggressive. As long as you play the wind right, and you know, keep your scent out of their nose, you can get pretty tight on them, get pretty close. Even if the cows see you and they can't smell you, they kind of don't know what you are yet. But these bulls are generally pretty desperate to find other cows, and you can be pretty aggressive and call them. And the other thing about, you know, maybe moving into cow season, you can still use those calls effectively. Like I said, you know, they're a herd animal. They want to be together. And say you get a little too close and you bump that group of cows and they're kind of maybe just walking away from you, maybe not running, but they're walking away from you. You can cow call, and it's so ingrained in them to be together. They'll usually, one or two of them will stop and turn around and look at you. And that may be the 5 seconds you need to get a shot off. So even hunters in the cow season, keep that cow call with you because it's still very effective. And you can even sometimes locate them with that. You know, say those elk are bedded in the timber somewhere, you kind of know where they are. If you get generally, you know, maybe 100 yards of them, you can cow call a little bit and they may answer you back. And that way you know exactly where they are. So you can always use these calls and all time, all throughout the year. Sometimes you can use those as location calls to figure out where these elk are.
Absolutely.
When it's legal. Let's
it's
make that caveat. No, I have two things I want to build on there. I know we're going to talk about hunting, like calling tactics and bull tactics and all this later, but while we have our resident elk expert here, going back thinking about me being a standard Kentucky whitetail hunter, having never hunted elk in Kentucky, I hear a lot of people that they still try to bring a lot of these, I guess for lack of a better word, gimmicks to the table to elk hunt. What do you think? Is there a way to beat an elk's nose? Can I spray down? Can I use ozone? Can I do anything? You know,
I've personally never tried the ozone thing, but from what I know, basically the ozone thing is for when you're sitting stationary.
Yep.
And maybe it would work. I don't know, but there's always a possibility it would. But for me, playing the wind is a lot easier to do than some fancy thing you got to stick over your head that's a couple $100. You know, you get a little piece of yarn and hang it out in front of me and tell which way the wind's blowing. And, you know, all right, the elk are that way, wind's blowing this way. I got to get around below them, you know, get downwind of them. That's a lot more effective. And, you know, to be honest, I've snuck up. I'm sure we've all done this. You know, all the years that we've darted elk and snuck in on elk, doing different things for research, I can get just as close to an elk wearing a white T-shirt as someone with the biggest, fanciest Sitka gear on can. If I play the wind right and I'm fairly still and I watch my movement, elk keying on movement and scent. So if you can beat those two things, you can sneak right up on an elk. So you don't have to have all the big fancy equipment. Sometimes you just got to use a little strategy, and that sometimes that will work better than anything.
And the other point that I think you highlighted there that was really nice was elk do make a lot of noise coming through the woods, and you're talking about being aggressive. You know, if you're calling and you're making noise, like you don't have to worry about stepping on every twig. It might be advantageous to you sometimes to make a little noise, you know, while you're moving brush. I thought that was a good point that you made as well. That a lot of our hunters, because you just look at it as a whitetail mentality, right? They're not quite as flighty or jumpy as a whitetail is. You don't have to be to that level of sneaky, I guess.
Yeah, because if you watch a big bull or even a younger bull, when they're kind of feeling their oats and they're out there tearing a tree all to pieces, like I said, they're going to totally destroy that tree. You know, rip it out of the ground if they can. So if you get up close to a bull and he's aggressively calling to you, he's bugling back at you, but maybe he just won't close that distance. You know, start bugling and get a tree or get a stick and rake a tree up and down and make all kinds of noise and beat the ground with it. He may think, hey, there's another bull over there. I got to go beat him up. You know, so yeah, you can make more noise. And that's the other thing. If you ever sneak in on a herd of elk while they're just kind of laying around, man, they make all kinds of noise. It's almost crazy how much noise they make. So, you know, you can make a little noise, but you know, if you're sneaking in on cows, but if you're bull hunting, don't be afraid to make some noise if you need to. If you want to get real aggressive and have at it, because it may just work for you.
Yep. I like it. What else we got?
The only other thing I could think of, you covered it some. I was trying to talk about what our hunters might expect in terms of group sizes, you know, both during rut and after rut for the different seasons. based not only on like, what we think they should do, biologically, but how does hunting pressure, habitat, the different types of properties, how do those things, other external factors play into it? What should our hunters expect to see?
Okay. Yeah,
That makes
I
sense.
touched on a little bit. If people come down kind of pre-rut to scout, they're probably good if they're in a good spot. They're going to see probably a group of herd bulls in a spot. Maybe 4 or 5 bulls together hanging out. And these nursery herds are going to see those, which may be anywhere from 5 cows with 5 calves to 20, 40 cows with 20, 30 calves with them. As you move into that rut, like I said, those groups are going to bust up. Cow herds are going to be anywhere from, like I said, 5 to maybe 20 with 1 to 2 big bulls in there, depending on where you are, what kind of territory you're in, and the density of elk there. But you may, get to a spot. I've been to places you may have a big bowl that's a couple hundred acres. You may have 4 herds of elk in there and 5 or 6 different bulls working back and forth. They're chasing these cows and chasing each other. So, during rut, expect to see a bull with at least 5 to 10 cows with it. That's kind of the typical herd you're going to see. After rut, you're going to see, probably still you'll see some big bulls, and that cow herd size will probably increase a little bit to 15, 20 maybe. You move into December, you can still see a group of 5 to 10 cows, but you may see 40 to 50 depending on the area you're in and the density of those elk and the forage that's there. As winter goes through it, those herd sizes will stay about that size. So you'll see 20 to 40 cows together and a couple of bulls here and there. But like I said, those bulls are going to move off kind of by themselves as winter approaches. So it varies a little bit, but it'd be somewhere. Typical herd size is 10 to 15 elk primarily.
All right. I think I have one more question.
Okay.
That I don't think we touched on. So elk are, would you say, crepuscular?
Yeah, because you're going to, well, it depends on time of year, though.
I know. That's what I want to talk about. So I guess I'm trying to prepare our hunters, right? If we go out scouting right now, probably not going to see them in the middle of the day, right? What are we going to look at? How their activities are changing during rut and then later on in the year, just to kind of give them an idea what they would expect to see.
Right. Right now, like I said, it's hot. Elk don't like heat, but they have to come out and feed. So right at dark, they're going to come out of the woods. They're going to feed all night out in the open, primarily. As soon as the sun starts coming up, man, they're headed right back to the woods again. They don't want to be out in that heat. And that's kind of the same thing with rut. They may stay out a little bit longer. We're starting to get a little more cooler nights, cooler mornings in October. But primarily it's, right at daylight and right at dark is the only time you're going to see them. Unless you're, move in on their territory and figure out where they're bedding. As winter approaches, November, December, they're going to stay out a little bit more. It's cooling off. If it's a really cold, so I think some of the best days we ever had out darting elk was when it was, 40 degrees and raining outside. Complete misery for us, but for elk, it's heaven. It's a cool day. It's nice and wet. There's water everywhere to drink. They've got a good forage, and no one's bothering. They'll stay out all day. So a lot of it depends on the weather. If it's a hot day, they're going to stay hid for the most part. They don't want to be out in the sun. If it's a nice cold day, whether it's raining or snowing or whatever, they're going to stay out a little bit more. Stay out, and they may stay out all day long. Just depends on the day and what's going on in their life that day.
Yeah, from my experience here in Kentucky, definitely when you're hunting the rut, being out there middle of the day can be a very productive time. We think about them, maybe they went and bedded up, but really the cows are going and bedding down, but you've got a bull that wants to participate in rut activities.
Ready to go.
Those satellite bulls, they don't, they go easily a month without hardly sleeping or eating. You can get one fired up in the middle of the day. So I would definitely consider that instead of just doing it in the morning and an evening, is to be out there. We had a bull last year that he fired up every day at about noon. So something to think about.
Yeah, 'cause like I said, they've got one thing on their mind, and it's to find girlfriends. And if
Yep.
it's like you said, if it's the middle of the day and you sneak in on and start cow calling, you'll probably fire him up.
Yep.
And those cows are not going to move, but he probably will. So if you can find them and you may be pretty aggressive and get him to come right to you. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and those satellite bulls, we keep saying satellite bulls, but a
Not a
satellite
bad
bull
word.
can, yeah, it can be anything from a spike to a 350-inch,
Mhm.
stud. So don't, when we say satellite bulls, it's not like that's the little guys out there. They can certainly be good elk, and certainly elk that a lot of people are happy, and they're the ones that are going to really come in hot to calls as well.
Right.
So I got no problem hunting some satellite bulls.
No.
Yeah, that's good distinction. Antler size and antler and body size determine a lot of their social status because they're fighting, but some elk are just generally going to be more timid than others. So you might have a smaller bull, running a particular group and having the larger antlered animals on the outside. Although it's probably not very common.
Yeah, but
Or, you may have 4 or 5 big adult bulls battling it out.
yeah,
And they're not really any of them are satellite bulls. It's just he who's strongest that day wins.
Mm-hmm. I like it. So I guess one of the reasons we wanted to do this, I think probably the three of us in particular, along with other biologists out there in the world, we more or less subconsciously use all this stuff when we're elk hunting. We've got an idea. We've chased them around Kentucky enough that we can kind of tell when we're in the right spots. It might be a north facing slope in the early season. There might be some water. There might be, we might be able to smell a wallow, whereas somebody else might not even really know what that smell is. So we're trying to just kind of convey some of that across to our hunters. I feel like I just subconsciously use all this information without really processing it. Just because we're around it all the time, and that's, this has been our life's work, is studying elk. So you might as well apply it to something as fun as elk hunting. There's a lot of good resources out there. There's a lot of, good papers on what habitat elk use, different things. A lot of Kentucky specific research is out there and available that may be of interest. So Dan, is this a Kentucky elk photo? I assume that's one you've taken.
It is. Yeah. That's from a few years back, but yeah, it was.
Yep. I think I probably know where that's at.
Mm-hmm.
Probably know which elk that is. So,
yeah.
Well, what else are we thinking? If not, we'll cut it short and roll on to the next one.
I think it was good. I always appreciate having our resident elk expert to get on and share his wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely.
Hope it helps.
Yep. And what we'll do, so this will be the first time everybody's seen Dan's. I'm gonna stop your sharing and briefly share. So again, it's got.
Oh, is it going out in the wild? Oh, look at it. There it is.
It's going out in the wild. Not that it's not on the internet and he's not gotten to share calls, but so shout at us. I mean, all three of us are happy to talk elk biology. It is, I can't stress enough that it's a different animal than whitetail. I liken it more to turkeys for the folks in the East that have turkey hunted. It's a little bit more like that than it's going to be a typical deer hunt. So shout at us if you got questions. We're happy to talk elk biology. It's one of my favorite topics, but either way, so like I said, draw results we're working on putting them up. They may beat this video out. I'm not sure, but it's all been conducted and we're getting those out. And so be sure to call us. If you've got questions about your unit draw, we can help you a little bit better now that we're kind of dialed into a smaller part of the map. I know I've said that 100 times, but it's the truth. think about getting out there and getting a good scouting trip in. We've got about half of July left in the whole month of August. You can see elk out there. As Dan said, you know, it's going to be kind of a morning and evening thing, but you can see their tracks. You can see their scat all day long. Get out there, get on the ground, start getting your scouting in. Can't stress that enough. So y'all got anything to close?
Fresh out of closers. You would think I would have a
Fresh
humdinger
out of closers.
after 2 weeks. I'm just saying thanks to Dan, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You're going to see a little bit more, Dan, especially next week again. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you next week. Appreciate it.